Welcome back to Badger Blitz TV, your Rivals.com destination for all things Wisconsin athletics. I'm Matt Perkins, joined as always by Badger Blitz publisher and editor-in-chief, John McNamara. Great to see you as always, buddy.
Matt, it is good to see you too.
We've got a special Sunday episode today because there's been a lot of big news on the recruiting trail for the Badgers. We will start with the latest commitment, and that is four-star quarterback Carter Smith, former Michigan commit, decommits and ends up at Wisconsin. John, how big of a deal is this for Luke Fickell, Max Steinecker, and Pat Lambert?
Significant. It's even more interesting that they were able to pull this off without an offensive coordinator, and they did that largely throughout this whole process. Now, it wasn't a lengthy process, but they were able to do that. And like you talked about, Max and Pat were pretty significant in this. They are the ones that were, I guess, first boots on the ground. They went, I guess, a handful of weekends ago down to see him play in Florida. And then that really got the process really heated up. Obviously, stuff with Wisconsin and Carter were going on a little bit prior, but that really started to get things heated up. Obviously, then you get them up for the Oregon game. And I don't want to say this typically doesn't happen, because if you've paid attention the last couple days, this week, there have been a lot of blue chip quarterbacks that have moved around. So it's not like you can say, well, this never happens where a four-star kid, winds up, because it does, and it has happened just recently. But, generally from Wisconsin's lens, you don't pick up a type of kid like this at this point in the cycle. Generally you have kids committed for a long time, and the example of that is Landon Locke, right? And he's still committed as of today. Now you have Carter Smith in the mix, but it's significant. A true dual threat guy. If you watch his tape, I think that might be the thing that pops out the most is, what he's able to do with his legs. I mean, he's got legit
bring that
speed
tape up. We're going to put it up while we keep talking about him, because he's got the arm. He's a top 100 player in the country overall. What I think number 3 or number 4 dual threat, according to Rivals in the country. And you talk about his legs. We're going to see some plays here with his legs here in a minute, but he seems to have a lot of the tools that you want in a quarterback, no matter what system you're playing in.
Yeah, specifically, the RPO stuff, and not to say, this guy would have been a Phil Longo guy, but I think he would have been a guy that could fit in Phil Longo's offense. Obviously, it's going to be very interesting to see who Wisconsin brings in. But I think, like you talked about, Matt, the way the college game is now, a guy like Carter Smith's going to help out just about any offense, and it's going to be very interesting to see who the coordinator is, what he wants to bring in. But, obviously that Wisconsin's going to start building around Carter Smith for the future. I think that they're going to have to obviously go through the portal to get one or two or multiple guys this year, because that quarterback room, I think, is going to be in flux. But to land a top 100 kid, 4-star guy with his skill set, he's coming on campus early. It's awfully exciting for Wisconsin. Obviously, the recruiting fans who follow the stuff very closely.
I mean, it has to be, especially this late in the cycle, like you mentioned. But that also brings up, what's the future of the quarterback position in Madison with Longo leaving? Because he's obviously very close with both the Locke family and the Matoyers, and maybe Matoyer has said, many times how, he has such a close relationship with Coach Longo. And the reason he came to Wisconsin was because of Coach Longo. I mean, I'm curious, John, how many quarterbacks will they have on the roster for a bowl game if decommitments and transfers, turn out the way they could?
I joke with Carter's dad when we talked. I said, Wisconsin might need him to play in the bowl game if needed. He just kind of laughed, right? But it's tough to say, and I hate speculating, but it's obviously on the table about who's going to be available, who is going to be on the roster. You have the portal window opening. I think it's the 9th or something. It closes on the 24th, so it's a quick window. It's right during the bowl prep and stuff. So you already saw Colacruz leave, and the Locke's connection to Phil Longo is well documented, as is Mabry. So I think it's realistic that all those guys will be looking around. Again, it's tough to speculate. It's tough to say this for sure, because they haven't come out and said anything on their own. But a lot of moving parts there, and that just kind of leads me to say that Wisconsin will absolutely have to go in the portal. It's just kind of a question of how many guys that they want to take.
And then also what happens with Tyler Van Dyke, right? Because he will have another year of eligibility left. Does he want to stick around with the new offensive coordinator? How well is he recovering from his injury? There's so many questions to be answered at the quarterback position. A lot of that will obviously come down to whoever the new offensive coordinator is. If you were to guess, John, how many transfers do you see them taking at the quarterback position?
If your room is Carter Smith and Milos, yeah. I mean, I think that's realistic. I don't think it's crazy to talk that way, right? Because of what we know and what could potentially happen. Look, they could very well bring in everyone.
Yeah.
The Locks could be back. Mabry could be back. So again, all we know about for sure right now is Cola Crew, but I think that's a real possibility. So I think you're looking for your starter as much as, I think a lot of people like Carter Smith and a lot of people like Mabry. It's really tough to tell a kid like that, hey, I need you to come in and start as a true freshman. Now, has it been done? Obviously it has. But I don't know that Carter Smith's ready to do that. I don't think it's maybe fair to say that to someone, but you're likely looking for your starter through the portal and potentially adding another depth piece, a lot like Phil Longo did in his first cycle, where he went and, he added Nick Evers, which was the future, and then Tanner Mordecai, which was the present, and Braden Locke, which was the, wherever Braden Locke was at that point. And they ended up starting the most games for Wisconsin. So everything can be lined up on paper. You just don't know how it's going to play out. But I would say 2. I really do think 2, if not more. Now, does your coordinator bring along a quarterback or 2 with him? I think that's realistic too. The guy that is starting on his current team and maybe a guy that's in the high school ranks. It all depends on who they bring in at coordinator for Wisconsin, and then you'll see the more dominoes start to fall from there. But even before that, you could see guys starting to enter the portal because that's coming up in just a couple of days.
Well, let's talk about the other big commitment then from this past week, and that is Jaylen Williams, another Michigan flip. He didn't have the whole decommitment process. He just flipped. And I guess the first thing is, how did his recruitment flip, seemingly pretty quickly?
He's an interesting name because, when we do like the original Sweet 16, he was probably in that original one for that 2025 class. And that was largely Greg Scruggs, the relationship that those two had. And, he visited Wisconsin a few times very early in the process. Things started to kind of fade. Obviously, Scruggs, leaves the staff and, that opened up. Right. Goes to Michigan. Didn't last long there. And then, for a long time, obviously, Williams is committed to Michigan. And, you didn't really think Wisconsin had a need there because you had the offensive outside linebackers committed. And then Brennan Ames decommits, goes to Tennessee. That coincides with Wisconsin turns up the heat on Jaylen Williams. And that's probably the biggest piece there is Wisconsin likes him on the edge. Now, whether he stays there at 6'6", 260, that remains to be seen. But I think that was something that appealed to him when I talked to him about that. The ability to play standing up, the ability to kind of be multiple, the ability to be versatile in that defense, I think really appealed to him. And that's why, part of it that he winds up at Wisconsin.
And yeah, that's interesting because obviously if he was going to stay at Michigan, it seemed like he was going to be a proper defensive end there. And, I brought up the highlights here and we're going to watch him a little bit because he is a phenomenal athlete. He's an absolutely phenomenal athlete. He's got, he's been gifted with great physical skills. And if I guess it's going to be Matt Mitchell then as his position coach and not EJ Whitlow. But if he can get him to play with a motor and to maximize that physical skill set, and he's able to stay at the right weight and he doesn't, get up to 280, 290 and kind of force himself on the edge, he could be a really special player. But it's really interesting to me that, the top, at least in ranking, defensive linemen from last class and this class now are both edge players in Willer and Jaylen Williams. And if both of them stick at outside linebacker, that's going to be a bit of a surprise. Yeah,
and I think I like that comparison too. That's kind of what I came up with. A lot of Willer similarities there. But, to be honest with you, I would have thought Willer every day of the week was a defensive lineman.
Me too.
And, I was curious if it was just the need at outside linebacker during fall camp and, what's he been working at, throughout the fall. We haven't seen the team practice, obviously, during the regular season. So is that a long-term thing with Willer on the edge? I tend to think, for a number of reasons, and largely the most being the need on the defensive line that, I don't know for sure, but if Willer was back with the defensive line and he was all of a sudden 280 pounds in the spring, that would not surprise me, and it wouldn't surprise me with Jaylen Williams. You read stuff that his coach talks about. Sure, he could play at this weight and he could stay there, but if you wanted him to, he can go 6'6", 290, I think easily. In a couple of years, it's just kind of how his body develops, what he looks like in the strength program. And, there's been a lot of guys like that, at Wisconsin where, hey, let's kind of just see where his weight takes him and, we'll move him around. But it's not a bad problem to have, certainly as a guy that could play outside linebacker or, grow into a defensive end.
Definitely not a bad problem to have. It's, there's a lot of young talent now on this roster. I think, on these edges, they've been building in these recruiting classes. I think after this Carter Smith commitment, they're up to 18 or ish in the country. I want to say I might be off by 1 or 2, but I mean, what is that? 10 4-stars now currently committed in this class, John?
10 4-stars. Yeah. And they're right there. They're, that's 17 mark, 17, 18. It, kind of changes by the minute now. And obviously there's going to be a lot more that fluctuates, but going back to Smith, he's the highest rated eventual signee, I guess in a couple of weeks here, the second highest rated behind just Graham Mertz at that quarterback position. Mertz was, obviously very high up there. I think he was in the top 50, and Carter Smith is just inside that top 100. But going back all the way to 2002, this is the highest rated guy. Now, Mertz will tell you that it doesn't always guarantee success. But, you're not going to turn away a top 100 quarterback at this point in the recruiting cycle. That's a significant win for Wisconsin.
John, I think this is probably one of my bigger Badger hot takes over the past 2 years. I think Wisconsin would have won 8 games last season and this season with Graham Mertz.
Oh, man. Fans are going to love to hear that. And
I know. You know what? I think Mertz was a better fit for Longo than he was for Christ. I really do. He spent his entire high school career in the gun. He's, being back there, and he very much showed he's not afraid to sling it. He's not afraid to throw it up. And Mertz was cursed by some of the worst offensive lines that the Badgers have seen. This is my 100% opinion. I can be dead wrong. I'm sure there will be people in the comments telling me that I am dead wrong. I'm getting used to that. That being said, I still believe that Mertz's arm talent and natural ability to play out of the gun would have done better than Mordecai, definitely better than Locke, and a healthy Van Dyke might have been better. But I still I still believed in the arm talent of Mertz, even with some of the questionable decision making.
I'm 100% with you. And during his career, someone who knows a lot more about football than I do, basically said that, if he could sit back and just kind of chuck to that first read, let's just say that was better suited for his game. I'm not going to say, well, he would have done this and he would have done this, but that was better suited. He struggled making his progressions and going to a second, third option. And look, like you said, Matt, that's where he was comfortable, sitting in the shotgun, knowing most likely where he was going with the football. And he had an arm where you saw him in practice at times where you're just like, this guy can make every throw. Yeah. And then the next throw would be like, what was he thinking? But not to make this a Graham Mertz podcast, but I agree. That was the fit that was probably best for him. And,
that's one of the many what ifs of the first 2 seasons of the Luke Fickell tenure. But no matter the results on the field, we know that off the field on the recruiting trail, they're definitely doing some big things. This is back-to-back classes, John, that are some of the highest rated since Rivals has been tracking Wisconsin. And to me, at least, that is probably the biggest thing I can point to at the minute to say, this team is going to have future success because of the talent base that they're building through recruiting.
Yeah, and fans always ask of, what's realistic and what can Wisconsin do, and if you look at it right now, I think they can be, five. The goal should be, like 5, 6, 7 in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
You're not going to recruit to the level of Ohio State. You're likely not going to recruit to the level of Michigan, USC,
Oregon.
Penn State, Oregon. Like those are kind of like the, that I think, Oregon, Ohio State's in a tier of its own. Then you go down to the second tier. So maybe like that third tier, like that's where Wisconsin should be. And I think it's realistic. And look, now they're consistently putting together, small-ish sample size, but this is a third class of, top 25 recruiting classes. And this one maybe squeaks inside the top 20. Obviously there's a lot of things that are going to happen in the next couple of days here, but when you talk about what's going well for Wisconsin, it's inside that recruiting department in Camp Randall and the work that Max and Pat are doing. And again, to kind of tie it all together, they were influential in Carter Smith because, look, I know for a fact Phil Longo was not involved in this really at all. I mean, minimally involved in this. And you saw that when the guys that went down to see him right away were Max and Pat and not the offensive coordinator. And that's why the Phil Longo being fired stuff certainly didn't surprise a single person.
All right. Well, to close it up, they say coffee is for closers, and Max and Pat have definitely earned their coffee this week. That is going to do it for us here on Badger Blitz TV. Make sure you like, subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff, and that you're subscribing to BadgerBlitz.com for the best message boards, Badger info, and just general Badger news anywhere in the known universe. Until next time, he's John McNamara. I'm Matt Perkins, and we'll see you in the den.